Today we're going to explore director Joe Connor's unique path into filmmaking, from his background in performance art and silent theatre to his hands-on experience as a projectionist. All of this laid the foundations for his unique filmmaking style. His career took off when he borrowed a friend's 5D camera and started shooting music videos, editing on a laptop he received due to his dyslexia, something I can relate to. Ultimately, this led to projects like Coldplay's Everglow, Sam Smith's Prey, and his virtual production video for Ellie Goulding. He's also shot commercials for Land Rover, Louis Vuitton, Volvo, BBC and Singleton, to name just a few, which we all break down in this episode. Finally, we balance things with Joe's more personal projects, his short films, the Supermodel collaboration, and he's even written a folk album. Because we ended up talking for over 3 hours on this podcast, we're going to have to release it in 2 parts. We never did have time to speak about his long-form collaborations with Paul Weller and the specials, but hey, maybe we'll get to do that in the future.
Action!
So what I thought we'd start with is, it's usually a chronology of like the conversation, kind of start at your beginnings and how you kind of first entered the industry, or maybe go back a little bit before then, because I know you studied mime at performance arts, right?
Yeah,
University.
Yeah, it was. It had a very strange. It was a very strange course. It still is a strange course. It's at this place called the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. And it's like,
This is St John's Wood, is it?
yeah, it's like Judi Dench went there and Laurence Olivier went there,
Right.
and it's all the sort of great and the good. And then they have this weird little cupboard where oddballs go and do things. And the course it was called Alternative Theatre and New Performance Practice, whatever that means. And it's now called, halfway through me being there, they changed the name to Performance Art. And so it's like, everything is basically like a theatre maker's course or a maker's course. So anything from if you wanted to do live art or body art, or if you wanted to create mime or shows, basically anything that falls outside of like normal theatre.
And is that geared as a performer? Would you be performing?
No,
or
not,
this is
I mean, so it's basically like if you want to be a self-generating artist, that's a course for like self-generating artists, where you're not waiting for like, your agent to call you and give you a script. They have like the actors course there that is very well regarded, and they have lots of technical theatre courses, so like sound design and lighting design and set design. But all of those sort of work on that hierarchy of, you're going to get an agent, and an agent's going to call you and give you a script. And then they have this one course which was just for you are self-generating artists. And so that could be that you want to be a live artist, and by live art I mean things like Franco B or Ron Athey, which are like sort of body performance art. People that will go and do like endurance things at the Tate, or
right.
You might even call
David
Blaine a performance artist.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But then, it can also mean, that you create work yourself as well. So like, it's probably the closest they've got to a director's course, really.
And is that a course that you stumbled across, or is it something that you hunted down?
I actually accidentally got into it.
You accidentally got
I accidentally got into it, yeah. At the time when I was 18, I didn't know if I wanted to go and do music at like a music college or go and study acting. Like every sort of loud 18-year-old, I was like, I'm going to be an actor, and I'll be a fantastic actor. I'll be the best actor in the world. And I applied to all these acting courses, and, they're all pretty similar. You kind of turn up with 2 monologues. You've got your Shakespeare and you've got your contemporary, and you do it all in your sort of drama blacks. And I had I think I can't remember I think I applied for like Goldsmiths and a place out in East London called East 15, which is an acting school, and then a few music places, so like Trinity in Greenwich. And I always knew I wanted to come to London. I was like, I didn't even look anywhere other than London. I was like, I'm just going to move to London at 18. And I turned up to this school in St John's Wood, and my mum dropped me off. She drove me down from Warrington, and she dropped me off outside the school, and then she went to the Ideal Home exhibition in the Excel Centre. and I sat in this room, like, with my little monologues and my blacks, and I was looking around, and everyone was like dressed in normal clothes, and no one had any monologues. I was like sitting there, and I was listening to this sort of teacher talk about all this weird shit that I'd never heard of, like all this performance theory, basically, that, you know, semiotics by Roland Barthes and things like that. And I was like, what the fuck am I? What is this? Like, I have no idea what. Like, I'm in the wrong place. So when we had a little tea break, you know, sort of an hour into this thing, and I've just quietly sat there and went up to the teacher. I said, I think I'm in the wrong audition. I'm here for acting for stage. She was like, oh God, yeah, no, this isn't acting for stage. This is alternative theatre and new performance practice. And I was like, what is that? And she was like, well, it's not acting. And I was like, okay. And she said, we've actually filled all the places for acting, so we can't see you for acting. So I went downstairs, and I remember calling my mum on a payphone, like put some fucking pennies in this payphone, called my mum, and I said, Mum, I'm at the wrong audition day. It's for directing, it's not for acting. She said, look, I've paid 15 quid to get into the Ideal Home exhibition. She said, if you're that good an actor, go in and act like a director. And I was like,
that's a brilliant.
I was like, fair dues, Jill. I was like, all right, fair enough, Jill. So I went back in, and I was like, you know, actually, I've had a thought. I think I would like to audition for this, actually. And they were like, okay, cool. So I just blagged the audition day, and like, I mean, I listened and figured out what they wanted from me, and just did it the best that I could, and got a place, and thought, it's one of those, same as any sort of drama school, you know, they apply, thousands of people apply, 20 people get in or whatever. And I thought, sort of got this random place, and it felt like a bit of a needle skip where the universe was going, you would be a terrible actor, but you might be a good director. So maybe, you know, and that's what I ended up doing.
So was it like an instinct when you got that place? Was it kind of like an instinct that you said the universe was guiding you in a certain direction?
Yeah.
And so did you apply for other places as well?
Yeah, I applied for other places and got into other places.
And you got in?
Yeah,
Right.
but it was just
Right.
like...
So it wasn't like that was your only choice?
No. I quite like fate, and I quite like...
pay attention to what's going on, what the universe is saying.
I quite like listening to what's like happening around me.
Yeah.
And also like, I'm a sucker for a good story. So if it's, you know, there wasn't really a good story to be had in, I applied for music at Trinity and I got in and now I'm here, but there's kind of a cool story, and like, I just fucking ended up in this weird course and I don't even know what I'm doing here.
So really, I mean, that was kind of testament to the fact that you were kind of interested in storytelling, right?
Yeah.
You're interested in hearing a good story.
And like, I like my horizons to be expanded. I like to be challenged. And I think like, you know, you can get really caught up in a sense that you know what you're doing, and it's quite nice to put yourself in a place where you're like, I actually have no idea what I'm doing. And that created this incredible sort of bloom of my life and creativity, and the types of work I made and created just completely changed.
Can I just put that period of your life into kind of cultural context as well, what you were into at the time? So obviously you wanted to be an actor. So were you into film at the time, or was it like theatre?
No, I wasn't into film at all. I mean, like, I like going to the cinema and watching films, but I wasn't a film nut. I was really into music, so I was obsessed with music.
You played the violin from a young age?
I played the violin, guitar, piano. I was like really...
is that your first love, would you say, music? Or?
Yeah. I mean, like, I've played music all my life, and it's always been part of my parents play instruments now, or not now, they did at the time, and they still do. And we were like a little Von Trapp family in Warrington.
Right.
So
your parents were they bohemian, or were they kind of quite open to arts?
I think they were open to arts. I don't know if they would class themselves as bohemian. My dad's a teacher, my mum's a nurse. They were pretty like normal
middle class kind of?
No, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, I think it's hard to sort of place yourself in class, but I wouldn't say... I mean, there's four of us. We come from Orford, Warrington, which is not...
You were saying earlier Warrington was a pretty rough place.
Yeah, and Orford, Warrington is like, which is this little ward in the middle of Warrington, is it's quite a spicy part of town, you know. It's like, it's not it's not a...
Was that part of the acting? Were you having to act to survive in the
Probably,
in
yeah,
the streets?
probably a little bit.
Yeah.
But then also, like, you know, your peers, my peers were not people that were like, you know, I want to go and do well at school. My peers were like, I'm going to go rob that shop, or I'm going to like steal that car.
Yeah.
And we, you know, it was like, we had a lot of like quite, you know, when I think about it now, it's got some mad stories, you know, that happened in my sort of schooling. But I, you know, I think my parents both were aware that if we played instruments and if we played music and if they took us to the theatre and if they like engaged, you know, my mum always made me do like the shows at school, and she not made me, but she was like, you should do the show, you should do the show, you should do audition for this, you should do that, you should like be in a pantomime, this weird thing in the town or whatever. And I actually ended up, I was in the opening ceremony of the Millennium Dome. That's one of my claims to fame. Yeah, I opened the Millennium Dome.
Nice.
And it was
Still
like,
there?
you know, my mum was very just like, you should do that rather than basically going robbing or going stealing or going, you know, whatever it might be.
When you were around these sort of colourful characters, were you thinking in terms of, I mean, speaking from my experience, when I was a kid, I was adopted, and I was put into a family that wasn't really like, they didn't feel kind of my people. And because of that, I thought photography and filmmaking was a natural, because I was always observing like the world through kind of this, felt like as a barrier and as me, and then it's craziness going on in front of me. Did you have the sense of that, sort of seeing it as a filmmaker almost, or seeing it as a sort of storyteller when you're seeing these things play out in front of you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, my dad's a storyteller. He's like the guy that sort of is able to tell very sort of funny tales, and like, you know, all my family from Liverpool, and they're all sort of like, you know, Scouse storytellers, and it's just always kind of been in my, that kind of like parlance of telling a story's just always been in my history, I think. And you know, I think a lot of that, when I was growing up, a lot of that part of the world was kind of living in the past in some ways. You know, like Liverpool is very built culturally around the Beatles and around the music of the 60s and Mersey beat, quite rightly, because it's like some of the coolest, greatest music of all time. And then Manchester was like, you know, Acid House had happened, Oasis had happened, or was sort of happening when I was growing up. But, you know, really the cool part of Manchester was Joy Division, Factory Records, New Order, that kind of movement that had sort of finished by 1990. And so, well, 91, 92. And so...
And what date was it when you went to the performance art course?
2005.
Right, yeah.
So I went in 2005.
Yeah.
So like, you know, I'm 1986. So like, I grew up in kind of, you know, from about 95 is when I kind of remember like being a kid and remembering things. The first 9 years can't remember anything. No, but you know, I think London really sort of represented this sort of the great city on the hill, you know, and the place where culture is, and the place where art is, and the place where music is. And, you know, when I moved to London, it was like the Libertines were exploding, Amy Winehouse was exploding. It was all that Camden music scene, which I ended up in because my drama school was in Camden, and I used to knock about there all the time. It suddenly was like, okay, yeah, I'm in the place where creative people are making things.
Did you immediately sort of feel at home and feel like this is your kind of calling?
Yeah, I mean, I think because Warrington's quite a small town, you know, and so if you went out, you always saw the same people, you always saw the same characters. There's always people you're trying to avoid. There's always, you know, like it wasn't, and I really loved the anonymity of being in London. That you can just like walk down the street, no one knows who you are. Not that anybody knew who I was in the north, but like, you know, if you have a grudge with someone, or this whatever it might be, you're like, oh, I gotta hide from that person. in London, you can just be completely anonymous. Nobody cares who you are. Nobody's in your business.
And you can completely reinvent yourself as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%, you know, and you can, you can really sort of like expand your horizons, and no one's going to say, well, what are you doing that for? You know, the North is very, my experience of the North, whether it's like that for a lot of people, was that it's very close-minded, like, oh, you don't want to do that, man. That's not cool, man. No, don't do that. That's, you know. And whereas in London, I found it was like, yeah, go and do all these things. You can go in. And now I actually, you know, go back to Manchester a bit now, and I think it's the coolest city now. It's so cool. You know, they've got a real like spirit. Well, they've managed to find a real spirit up there that kind of brings a bit of a tear to my eye, because I didn't grow up in it. I had to leave because of what it wasn't there when I was growing up. But now it's there. Definitely, it's definitely the coolest city.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I shot I shot commercials up there a few times, and every time I shoot, every time I'm shooting in Manchester, the first thing that surprises me is how friendly everyone is.
Yeah,
and it's just got a real kind of feels like a community spirit.
Yeah,
more so than you get in London. So it's like that's the trade-off with London, is you get the anonymity and you get the kind of the opportunities and everything, but to build your own tribe and to feel a sense of community, that's what takes the work in London, whereas in other places you get that.
Well, I think when I was growing up, those cities were just in transient spaces. So there was lots of, you know, what is now like the coolest part of London, of Manchester, sorry, like Ancoats and the Northern Quarter. That was just derelict when I was a kid. Like, you know, there's nothing there but a few pawn shops and like Affleck's Palace, which has always been there, but like there was nothing there. It's just derelict. And now it's like, you know, it's like, I suppose what people experienced with Shoreditch in the 90s, when it was like just derelict. And
it was this really weird kind of international shoe shop sort of wholesalers, and handbag wholesalers, and I worked there as well. I worked there as a dispatch rider, so you had these little kind of dispatch riding sort of offices as well, and it was mainly like derelict buildings.
And you now can't believe, because it's so close to the centre of London, you can't believe it was ever derelict. You're like, what was this? What, you know,
crazy. And
I mean, same in Manchester. It's like, you know, you kind of can't believe that it wasn't like it is now all the time. So
I mean, London was pretty bankrupt in the sort of 70s and 80s when I grew up. London was, you know, there's lots of areas of London that were just really, really run down. And compared to how it is now, I mean, it blows my mind as well, having sort of seen all the changes happen over the years. But going back to so you're at Performance Art School.
And sort of covering myself in blue paint and rolling about on canvases, and you know.
So it's like a free experimental stage of your life.
But
do you have a sense of which direction you're going to go in at this point in terms of the form?
Not really. I mean, I became very into silent. I think probably because I'm dyslexic, I became very into like silent theatre. So like, and at that time there was a lot of very, very good silent theatre. So things like, you know, Punch Drunk show, which now is like the biggest commercially viable type of theatre in London. But for a long time, like Felix, who ran Punch Drunk, was one of my tutors, and it was like, you know, they were just making work in the basements of bars or the basements of like office buildings in in Shoreditch and Old Street, and you know, and that is silent, movement-led experiential theatre where you know, you're not following a script, you're kind of following a feeling or an ambience. Or
I mean, I went to the Punch Drunk, the one, the recent one,
Burnt City.
To Burnt City, and I must say, I had quite a unique experience. I hadn't had an experience like that before. Certainly in theatre, for me, it was. I remember I actually got completely lost, and I ended up in the cabaret bar.
What they want.
And then the cabaret bar was like because I was trying to get back to the original bar, because I was trying to meet a friend back at the original bar, and I ended up in the cabaret bar. It's like a parallel universe bar. And then I saw these acts in the cabaret bar, and I could literally spend the whole night in the cabaret bar. And then my friend turned up, and I said, well, why don't we just go out one more time? And we're so pleased we did, because we went back out and saw the kind of the finale of some of the dance move, and it was one of the most emotional experiences I've had in theatre.
I mean, I count myself very lucky that I've seen the journey of that theatre company. So as I say, like Felix taught us at drama school, and a lot of us actually worked on their first big show, which was Faust in Wapping. We were all like in the art department, like helping, they built an Oklahoma city they built Oklahoma and cornfields in a factory in Wapping.
Do they get like a long lease on the premises then to be able to do, because it's not a usual kind of business model, is it?
Yeah, the place that they have now, where they do the Burnt City, they actually own in Arsenal, in Woolwich, Arsenal.
Yeah.
They actually own that building now.
Right.
Or they have a long lease on it. But for a long time, they were just like beg, stealing, borrowing places that were about to get bulldozed or demolished.
Yeah.
And the Arts Council would help them sort of.
Interesting.
But then, things like that was what I was becoming really interested in. So silent theatre, movement theatre, telling a story, the best version of mime is like the opening 20 minutes of Wall-E. It's like,
right, yeah.
You don't need to know what, nobody needs to tell you the story. You just totally get it from the movements and the attitudes of the main character. And so that was kind of what I was into. Not like silent mime, like pantomime, but like theatre where you just didn't need to hear the characters speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember the early Pixar, the Anglepoise Land?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that had quite an impact on me when I first saw that, because that was, I remember Spike Jonze did a commercial with the IKEA commercial, the light gets put outside.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you get real emotion.
Yeah.
Light.
Yeah. That's one of my favourite commercials, actually.
Is it?
Really? I love it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of my favourites.
You also mentioned The Dreamer by Jonathon Glazier.
Yeah.
Which is probably my favourite commercial.
I think it's like, that's a masterpiece, man. I mean, that's
unbelievably good.
And I think it's, that again, like, it really speaks to the type of work that I loved in the theatre as well, which is slightly, it lives in an atmosphere all of its own. It doesn't follow logic of a world that, he's like climbing up to look through this tiny little hole.
Could you find that, Jared? It's called the Dreamer, Jonathon Glazier. Just find Guinness Dreamer, Jonathon Glazier. Because it might be worth putting that up on as our first thing, because it is I think it's such an important piece of work.
I think he's just the greatest, isn't he? I mean, it's undisputed. He's probably the greatest British filmmaker that we've produced in a very long time. And from music videos to commercials, that journey and that piece of work is out of somebody that's got a back catalogue of absolute 10 out of 10s. That is the piece that would hang in an art gallery.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because it's not like the horses, Guinness is more well known.
Yeah.
Probably won more awards, though I say.
Sure.
But I think this is the one that, for me, is the one that I was completely.
Yeah.
Just, every time I rewatch it, because I grew up with that. That was on television at the time. I was kind of getting into commercials, and then when I re-saw it later, some of the commercials that I remember had such a fond kind of memory of. They don't age so well.
Yeah.
But that one is just, as if anything, now it's even more mind blowing to me that got made.
Well, if anybody ever wants does advertising work, it's like, I only drink Guinness, and maybe it does work.
Yeah.
It's like,
so here we go.
Because it's, you watch something like this and you're like, I want to, that is a world that like chimes with me. And so I drink the thing they tell me to.
Yeah.
It's advertising works, doesn't it?
For me, the voiceover and the music, the way the music works as well.
Yeah. Call him the champion of the Dream Club.
Yeah. And then the comedy, when he first comes to
as a squirrel.
I just wonder how this got. Given
this was my favourite shot, and then everybody comes running from behind.
The way he lunges forwards as well when he first starts running, he sort of it's coming to on your feet, isn't it?
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And then there's a shot of I remember a shot like guys getting pushed down from the stunt shots
when they climb up and people literally are falling off.
Yeah. And then the horse upside down laughing.
Yes. This is where we get into sort of quite deep theory on trivial things like commercials, but I think they for me, and I don't necessarily I don't know, this isn't necessarily the career I have, because sometimes I just have to make commercials that, get asked of me to make, and you can't always push everything, and you can't always like move into those spaces. And I think some filmmakers, sort of contemporaries of mine, have managed to do that, and that's more power to them and brilliant. But I feel like commercials exist. They exist in the world with us, and we have no say in whether we see them or don't see them, and therefore they should serve the function of art. That is my personal theory. It's like they inhabit the world in which I live in, and I want the world I live in, quite selfishly, to be beautiful and to teach me something and to have artistic merit. And that's a very like idealistic dreamer viewpoint on life, but I think the Sistine Chapel's just a roof, whatever.
Yeah,
like,
I remember.
But still you can make an amazing roof.
It's like an architect I once worked with said to me, good design doesn't cost any more to build than bad design.
Yeah.
And when you think about a bad commercial, they've still gone to the same effort as something that's really well written and really well directed, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And I think also, we're not as brave. It doesn't seem to me like we're as brave as, maybe we are actually, but maybe there's just more commercials being made, and so therefore the bravery gets diluted because there's more. But when I was speaking actually as a producer, really good friend of mine called Toby Corlander, who was involved in Partisan.
I know Toby, yeah.
Toby, really wicked guy, and he was. Is he
still doing the rucksack Instagram?
He's on he is actually.
There's an Instagram of him wearing a rucksack in all the places in the world or something. That's a very bizarre Instagram. It's very kind of funny, yeah.
But we were on this long flight somewhere for a recce, and he was telling me about doing Levi's drugstore with Gondry and doing Polaroid with Gondry, and he was like, we were just on this ride of not only us making amazing work, but the people around us were like, we'd make drugstore, Glazier would make this, Danny Kleiman would make this, like everyone would just be, Chris Cunningham would make this. It was like every piece of work by everyone at the top of the game was like a piece of art. It was like a unique, unbelievable.
There's no question it was a golden period of UK commercials.
For sure. And I think, now we're like, I don't know if we strive for the same. Well, I don't know if like agencies, clients, there's a tree, isn't there?
In a way, it's like what happened with the Easy Rider Raging Bull period in Hollywood, when they allowed the kind of art school filmmakers to come in for a moment, because the studio had lost contact with the audience, and they're like, we need some help here. So all these kind of art school filmmakers came in and made the most interesting films, because they were big budget films, but they were basically written as independent cinema films.
Yeah.
But they had the budgets to make them because they had studios. And then they made Heaven's Gate, and they lost a load of money, and the studio took it back. And in a way, that's similar, I think, to commercials, because that was a period where the director was king, right?
Yeah.
And when I first started shooting commercials as a DOP, the agency wouldn't come up to the director and ask them anything. The director was like completely within their rights to demand silence on set, and it was completely their set, and there was no negotiation really. And then what happened, I think, as the kind of economics changed, the agency started worrying about losing the client and started really listening to the client, and then it became, I think the big change also was digital, when a digital monitor came, and the client could say, is that actually what we're getting? And we had to say yes. Whereas before we said, no, just trust us. We'll deliver it to you when we're ready to. And that mystique and that kind of behind the emperor's cloth, the magician's cloth, allowed us to do more the creative, the director-led period.
I also think that, as you say, because like, as soon as the digital monitor comes in and everybody's kind of aware of what is being shot, that also sort of highlights a further issue, which is that up until we all get on set, so much of this industry is based on snake oil. It's like, what does a client actually buy? Like, they buy a treatment, which is a bunch of other people's images and some hopes and dreams, well written, to sort of fugazi people into like it's going to be fine. Don't worry. It's going to be great. It's going to look a bit like this. I'm going to do a bit like this. But really, like, the exchange of skill for money, for budget, the client, I mean, I'm like a client friendly director, I think, because I think that is such a huge stretch for people that are not necessarily au fait or day-to-day working in a creative industry. That's like, hang on, I'm going to give you 5 million quid. You're going to give me this 60-page treatment of other people's images and like hopes and dreams, and I have to be okay with it. Like, I would, you know, that's a scary prospect, I think, for anybody that is worried about their job or whatever. You know, they're like, it's better be good, because otherwise I get fired. So I think it, you know, whatever needs to happen within that exchange in order to allow cooler work to be made and for people to feel more comfortable within it, it would be good.
Yeah,
I don't know what the silver bullet is, but it's like, I totally understand it from a client point of view, because you got to be realistic about it, you know.
But it's become a committee now, hasn't it? It's become a creative committee rather than a single led voice.
Yeah.
And in that golden period of directing, it was a voice led by, it's a single director's, it's an author's voice, right?
Yeah.
And now it's more of a committee, because you have the agency, like I say, pandering sometimes too much to the client, and not standing ground with what the director's vision is necessarily, you know, because they want to keep everyone happy, and then that even the client will have an opinion. I mean, when I was employed as a DOP back in the day, it was just a director that chose me. No one else will get involved.
Oh yeah, now
it's then it's director and the agency, and now it's the director, the agency, and the client.
Yeah.
They've all got to approve you, and if one of them has a mate or someone that they would rather work with, then you're gonna
But also, like, I don't pick my DOPs necessarily based on the metric of the work that's on their reel. Sometimes it's like I pick them because I know what kind of, you know, long in the tooth now, that I know what certain kind of shoots are going to be like. You know, you're like, this is going to be a really tough shoot, and therefore, like, I might need a DOP that has a different human skill, or or like
someone you can go into the trenches with, kind of thing. Yeah,
someone you can go in the trenches with, or someone that maybe is going to bring some levity, or somebody that's gonna, you know, sometimes it's like, I need you to shoot some stuff while I'm over here talking to the agency, and I'm not actually going to look at the monitor. So like, I need to know that you've
got similar sensibilities.
Yeah. And you know, because you know, you need that B-roll or that which no one's going to sign off, or whatever, that everyone's going to love in the edit. So the metrics on which you pick your DOP is not, or mine is not always, oh well, they've done that job, so then I'll get them on there.
Do you tend to work with different DOPs depending on the job then?
Yeah, try to. I mean, recently I've been working a lot with the same DOP, and that's just, we've done a raft of the same commercial for the last year, so we've been doing sort of 12 commercials for the same client, and so therefore the continuity of the same DOP was important, and that's David Proctor, who just so happens to be brilliant anyway. But normally I have a wide variety of DOPs, quite happy to work with different people, quite happy to, like, there's a very good book that I implore everybody to read, which is called The Empty Space by Peter Brook, and it's Peter Brook's this theatre director from the 60s, and he wrote this book that codifies theatre into 4 different chapters. So there's the deadly theatre, the immediate theatre, the holy theatre, and I forgot the other one because I'm on the spot. And you know, like, the deadly theatre is something like Les Mis, right, which has been the same for 30 years, and a new actor comes in, and the old actor just teaches them exactly how to do it exactly the same, and the show goes on, and everything's the same, and it's been the same for 30 years, and it's brilliant, it's fantastic, it's like marvellous, but it's utterly dead. Like,
tradition kind of.
Yeah, it's culturally dead in terms of the conduit from audience to performance is like a one-way street. It's not a two-way street. So Peter Brook would say that you need to find the fresh water, and that might be a new person, or that might be, you know, a viewpoint that you've not opened yourself to before, and that conduit of, like, finding the fresh water is what allows you to create work that feels alive, that feels real. A lot of that is risk taking as well, and like mitigated risk taking. So not that I'm like a chaos demon, but I will try to find acceptable risks in my work. So, you know, maybe, yeah, not everything is like nailed down or bolted down, because I think it's important that you allow fresh water and you allow spontaneity and you allow things to emerge from the shooting of your work that you haven't thought about before, because it stops things being dead.
Could you give an example of that in your sort of pre-production process or whatever, how you'd create a bit of risk in there?
Well, I mean, how have I done? So my short film, Breathe. I had a rough outline on a piece of paper. I hadn't picked any locations. I had no costume. I had a crew of 2 people, and we just shot in the actress's house, and I'd never been there before. And then we just...
You didn't do a location recce beforehand?
No. And that might seem crazy, but most of my life is planning things to the nth degree and kind of killing the charm of it. And sometimes, you know, the reason why I wanted to make that film is because I wanted to make something that was a spontaneous...
Should we get it up and have a look at that?
Yeah. You know, I wanted to make something that was a spontaneous response to a way that I felt in that moment.
When was this made? Was it during lockdown?
2022 I shot it.
Right.
It came out in 23.
Right. And was it self-funded? Or?
Yeah. It's just self-funded, and it was just, you know, it was... So this is Emma, who is a friend of mine. She's an amazing dancer. And I had a rough piece of paper with rough beats on it of like what I knew the film would look like, or the structure that I wanted. I knew that I was going to shoot on Southwark Bridge because I like to walk a lot in London, and I always walk down Southwark Bridge because it's quiet. No buses go down there. No, it's a very quiet bridge.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. And the lights are nice as well.
Yeah, so I know that after 9 o'clock it's like a ghost town.
Yeah.
Bridge.
Yeah. Good. That's what I thought when I saw that. I thought it was a really good discovery, that location.
I mean, you're trying to find, you know, one of the tricks is you're trying to find value in images when you haven't put any value in. So it's like, this was self-funded and it didn't cost the world. And so I knew I didn't have a lot of money. So I was like, the magic trick is, how do I find big images and big value without any input, as in like fiscal input to create scale. So, you know, Southwark Bridge was a place that I'd walked up and down for 20 years like living in London, and always noticed, God, it goes really quiet about 9 o'clock at night. But again, didn't do a tech recce, I hadn't even seen the choreography before we went and shot it. And that sounds like it sounds like I didn't do my job, but the exercise of this film wasn't, can I like come up with the perfect shoot, because I already do that in my life anyway, you know. I'm constantly trying to get the most.
I would argue that maybe it's because your experience as a commercials and music video director, you kind of know, you have an instinct for it, like you said earlier, 10,000 hours. So you don't necessarily, you thin slice it. You don't necessarily need to do all of the prep work you'd normally do, because your instincts are constantly working. Yeah, and also it doesn't look, watching a short film, it looks like a really well-crafted piece of work. I mean, it really does, because you've got the whole repetition of her day at the beginning, and repetition with variation. So each time you come back to it, you've made some certain changes.
I mean, that was like, we were just in her house, and I was like, oh, you know, I was essentially, you know, I knew I wanted to do this repetition thing, and I was like, oh, actually, have you got some eggs? Yeah, cool, get the eggs out, let's crack some eggs. All right, what else can you do? Should we get in the shower? Okay, cool, what else can we do? And so there's a game that we used to play at drama school called the broom game, where you stand in a circle, and everybody would come into the circle, and the broom would become something else. So you would change the broom, or the sweep into something.
An imaginary object, so you just name what it is, do you?
Well, you'd come in and, like, you know, so the obvious is like somebody turns it into a guitar, and then somebody is clever and turns it into a broom, and then somebody is like, you know, but then what happens once you've gone around the circle once and everybody's exhausted all the ideas is that incredible stuff starts to happen. People start being unbelievably imaginative with this inanimate object. and you find really cool sort of things emerge out of something that you've kind of already sort of worked through stuff. And so, and one of the things I just notice in film is that ability for freedom is, we don't really allow it, you know, certainly in commercial filmmaking. It's like freedom is like not allowed,
right?
You know, everything has to be signed off, everything has to be buttoned down, everyone has to like know what we're doing, and that's all great, we can all do that. But this film was an exploration in like being physically present in a space with, you know, there was me, Emma, there was David Proctor and a focus puller, and we had a Steadicam up on for 2 hours on the bridge, and that was it. And that was the entire like cast, basically, the entire crew on the shoot, you know.
And the lighting on this one here, did you have
no, just all that.
It's all available, because it really does look like it's available light, but then I was thinking, wow,
no, but that's the skill of David to go, you know, while Emma, so we turn up on the bridge, and I was like, so what choreography are we going to do? And she was like, she was like, I'll just improvise to the sound of the city. So this isn't even to the music, this is her improvising to the city, and then I compose the track around it. And David was like, if you can try and, you know, before she started improvising, it was like, you look great when you stand here and here and here and here, so try and improvise,
work to these places,
you know. And that's how this film was created. And it, like, you know, the work of crafting this film was all in the conversations before the shoot happened, of trying to mine an interior experience and bring it exterior. So this feeling of like a monotonous repetition that erupts into a kind of bloom of spontaneity and presence, centeredness. And that communication between me and Emma is what became the backbone of a choreography. So the directing work was done in an adjacent manner, rather than, okay, so this is your mark and this is the thing and this is what I want and I want you to do this. That's all very immediate work of a director. But I think some of the best stuff is the adjacent work of a director, where you prep people in a mind state and with an atmosphere, and you prep them with different musical influences, or different I would send Emma poetry, and I'd send her music, and I'd send her pictures, and I'd send her just very adjacent things that are all essentially guiding somebody whose skill, she's an unbelievable dancer, she's a way better dancer than me, like I'm never gonna like tell her how to move, but I prep her so that when we get into the position and the camera rolls, the magic trick happens. The magic trick is the act of creation, and like that's the whole skill of film.
So it's having that kind of loose hold on it, and then sort of just nurturing something out. With some suggestions of other art and poetry or whatever you say. And seeing it come to life.
And being alive to it. Because I think a lot of people, or it's very easy, not a lot of people, but it's very easy to be scared by not knowing. And so therefore you like try to know, and you end up killing the charm of it, you know.
Do you think you could have done it to such a successful kind of end result at the beginning of your career, or do you think your career has helped with that kind of knowing what to focus on and knowing what to let go kind of thing? It's what the important bit is, the bit you do need to kind of go, no, actually we need to do that.
But it's that old Picasso saying, isn't it? It's like, it took him an entire lifetime to learn how to draw like a child, you know. And it's like, I think it's the same for all of us, which is, it takes us a lifetime of like learning the craft of how a set works, how actors work, how DOPs work, how that whole system works, in order for you to find some simplicity in it.
You
have to go through the complexity.
It's like you kind of climb the technical mountain of knowledge as a DOP, and you get to the top of that technical mountain, then you let it all go and start making films.
You have to say,
because then you got the kind of instinct. Should we look at the other short film as well? Well, since we're on this subject, because we're doing it in a slightly different order, which is fine. And then
I was going to jump back to
and then we can go, because it's Emma Farrell Watson.
Emma Farrell Watson.
Farnell Watson, and she's kind of like you've done 2 shorts of her. Breathe, the one we were just looking at, and After We Met is the other short that we should look at.
So we're actually working on a trilogy of films.
Yeah.
Of which the third one is the sort of third in this trilogy, and there are very, in a kind of Dogma 95, there are very loose rules about this film.
What are the rules then?
So it's always about a singular character, singular female character. It always involves water. So the first film, she's dancing on a bridge over the river. In this film, she's like, it's like beer is like, so water is an element.
Yeah.
Singular character, water is an element. It's always nocturnal, set at night. Always very small crew. So this was shot with, I mean, you could probably tell it was shot without a focus puller. It was shot, it was literally me and a DOP and Emma. That was
who's the DOP on this?
This was Morgan Sinclair.
Right.
But that, and some of that is because, you know, it takes, you know, if I'm working on a commercial, it takes, even though commercials are quick and music videos are quick, it's like, you know, it takes 10 weeks for that oil tanker to turn, of like, you know, until you, or maybe 12 weeks until you have the finished product. And sometimes I think we are scared of like sketchbook ideas, which is, you know, again, in the theatre, we have like scratch nights, or like you can go and watch an amazing, you can go watch the previews of amazing shows, you know, where they're like just previewing it in front of audiences and just testing things. They're quite happy to show their work. And I think in film, we have this like everything has to be super polished.
Yeah. It's interesting.
And I quite like this sort of punk attitude of like, yeah, we just went out and shot this and
you know,
just went and did it because, and like, you know, I have enough. It's the
shot on a loop.
It's the blessing of like I have enough work for people to know that I can make polished pieces of work.
You know. Yeah, so you've got nothing to prove in that sense. Yeah, so you can just be free with it.
Exactly.
I really, I mean, I like both the short films, but I found this one, I mean, I actually wrote some notes down on them, and I put capturing movement of truth, poetic and raw, and it's like, for me, it was like her character was on a tightrope, falling into trauma addiction or a celebration. I couldn't see which way she was going to go, because in a way, the alcohol, the drinking, part of it was like celebratory. Yeah. Another part of it for me was like, oh, is she an alcoholic? Is this a trauma? Is this gonna end badly? And I was always kind of on that kind of not knowing which way it was going to go.
I mean, like the dreamer is, you know, you don't come out of, you never see what he sees through the thing. You're not told, you're not spoon fed. And I quite like that.
Oh, see, that's for me was absolutely magical. I mean, I getting maybe a little bit too woo-woo on this, but
I'm very woo-woo, so it's fine.
Well, I had an experience with psychedelic once where I actually died and came back to life.
Wow, unbelievable.
And what happens is with this experience is people invariably laugh. Yeah. When they see what you see, which is hard to put into words, but you kind of, your reaction to it is to laugh.
Yeah.
Because it's beyond anything you could kind of have a kind of intellectual response to it. It's something so primal. So when he looks through the hole and he starts laughing, for me, that chilled me, because I was like, oh my God, I totally get that.
Yeah. But I think, it's like, you know, I think the human experience is quite silly. You know, we're just sort of like floating on a rock. Like, it's just, you know,
a big cosmic joke.
Right? Yeah. It's like, it's very silly. Yeah. Like, and we all sort of, we
take it so seriously.
Yeah. And this film, again, you know, it's like the duality of experience is kind of an interesting, it's just something to play with, isn't it? And I think that is when it comes to these shorts, that is a word that is kind of central to it, which is play.
You know? Right. Was that, I mean, just going back to the falling into trauma and the addiction celebration thing, was any of that intentional in your mind? How did you position the character? What were the cues you gave to her, or the kind of direction you gave to her?
I mean, I think I like things that I like alchemical things that are like building blocks,
like fusion,
or like building blocks of like what things can represent, right? So like you know, like her throwing the beer bottles can can be, as you said, like celebratory, but it could also be quite dark. There's a duality within that one sort of element. It wasn't, I didn't necessarily set out to be like, okay, I want to make this sort of dark, but that's kind of how my work comes out in the end. There's always like, it's kind of funny and kind of dark. It always has this sort of like duality.
Is that your taste in cinema and in other art forms as well?
I mean, like, I grew up, actually, my favorite type of filmmaker for a long time, was Charlie Chaplin. And it's like that,
that was before the mime course.
Yeah.
So I've
always kind of liked Chaplin, and it was like, there's nothing more dark than, I remember in City Lights, there's that famous scene where she thinks the tramp is a millionaire because she hears the car door, and he has to like creep away, and it's so stupid and so sad and so dark and so like harrowing, and really like
humanity.
There's so much humanity, and it's such a complex sort of plethora of experience, very singular image.
And it's like all done without dialogue is kind of amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's the thing that I've always quite liked. I've always quite liked that sort of type of work.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, the sort of kind of richness of that.
Yeah.
And like the deep, like you say, I guess by stripping the dialogue away, you end up with something more behavioural and human.
Yeah.
You actually have the words that are written and then spoken.
Yeah.
It's something that's more primal in a way, maybe more primal, operates on maybe a deeper level.
Well, and I also think people can see themselves reflected in it. Or that's the hope anyway. Like I don't necessarily think I make particularly cool work. Like I just make, I don't try for my work to be cool. Because I find that such a transient, ephemeral sort of quality, which is I actually like my work to be deep. And I like people to, whether it ends up being deep or not is up to the viewer or the audience. But
it comes from a deep place.
I like to try and find that sort of depth of humanity or something that people can connect to on a slightly deeper level, even if it's like a funny piece, or it's like a piece of comedy. There's always like a little something in there that is like you can kind of connect to a bit.
Well, I'd say that's true of Jonathon Glazier's work as well. In terms of there's one thing else we'll get onto when we talk about some of your commercials that I found some similarities. But
my God, similarities to Glazier. You're butter in the op.
But we should start with I think your music videos, because your history being so closely kind of musically trained, and having your first love being music. When did you start kind of first getting interested in making music videos as a director?
I think so. When I was at drama school, I took this job in a cinema, which was the Screen on the Green in Islington, and I was just a barman. And to be honest, it was a bar job that didn't finish too late, and we were pretty full on at drama school. We had to be in at 8 in the morning, 5 days a week until 6 every day for classes. So it wasn't like the type of uni experience where you have like 1 hour lecture a week. We had like full days, 10 hours, lots of physical movement, lots of like yoga, Pilates, lots of like theoretical lectures and then physical lectures. So it's a very intense course. And so I was like, I can't have a bar job that finishes at 3 in the morning. I'll be broken. So I got this bar job at a cinema thinking, well, that finishes at 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, it's pretty easy. And it's like, it's not a crowded bar where I'm screaming and shouting. And then the projectionist got ill, and they were like, we need someone to be a projectionist. We need to train a projectionist up, and it's an extra quid an hour. And I was like, I'll do it. Like, absolutely. So then they trained me to be a projectionist in an old 35mm cinema. And this was probably 2007. And I did that job until about 2013. So I was already like making work and established when I was still working there, but I loved it. I literally loved that job so much. I'd still do it now if I could. But they turned it to a digital projection house, and we all got made redundant, which was sad. But I think they got a 35mm back in there now though recently.
It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, it's coming back now.
But they, you'd watch the same film every day, 4 times a day, 7 days a week. And I worked there all the time. I was there 5-6 days a week in the evening. And so you watch the same films over and over again. And quite often, like, I'd turn the sound down in the projection booth and just watch the edit. And that became my kind of film school of shifting my brain from a theatrical brain thinking about stages to suddenly like a film brain thinking about cuts and lenses. And that just happened really naturally, you know. It's like just watching so many films in such a short amount of time.
It's really interesting going back to this idea of fates and the fact that, you know, I couldn't think of a better training for your work than doing the performance theatre work and learning all those kind of technical aspects of the theatre game.
Yeah.
And the kind of like the fact it was experimental as well, and so it allows you to kind of have that playtime. And then having training in cinema, being kind of as a projectionist with the sound off, see
in the dark,
the raw elements of the cinema
upstairs in the dark,
and giving your having time in both those environments to allow it just to kind of like osmosis in a way, just to sink into you, rather than having to really kind of work at I'm sure you work very extremely hard at both, but having to kind of consciously work at learning something. It's coming into you.
It's just coming into you, and you're just like, like at the time I hadn't, you know, I'd gone to a course that I'd never heard of before, and I was sort of finding my feet in it. So I had no idea what I was going to become or what I was going to do, and I had this theatre company that we were making sort of work. But you know, it was really when I was watching all these films, and then I was thinking, you know, I sort of, I don't know, I thought like, actually, it was music videos where I thought it'd be great to make some. And then I just started like messaging mates that were in bands or people that I knew.
And this you had this epiphany whilst at the projection.
Yeah.
So you started going
about 2009. That I thought.
Yeah. It's like you were saying earlier to me before we started rolling the cameras. The mentality of the place where you're from, Warrington, is to kind of keep it a go. And so you thought you just sort of.
Yeah, my mom always said I'd get where water wouldn't. Do you know what I mean?
So
get where water wouldn't.
All right.
Do you know what I mean? You just like.
She sounds like quite a character. Your mum.
Cool, Jill. Yeah, I love Jill.
Yeah.
But you know,
you call her Jill, not Mum.
I call her Mum.
Yeah.
I actually very rarely call her Jill. But I just thought it'd be funny. Say her first name term. But she's it was, you know, you just sort of like, someone's got to do it, haven't they? Someone's got to like make music videos, and you might as well like give it a go and see if it's you, and you know, move on to something else if it's not you.
But this is a great, I mean, listening to you talk is such a kind of great education for our viewers, because where they're not sure, you know, when you're entering into the film industry, you kind of don't know how your route's going to turn out, and it's like, it's going to be quite daunting, I would imagine, for people, and you know, the fact that you kind of you allowed the fate to play a hand, and you took every opportunity.
And I was lucky in terms of the fact that, like, you know, I went to a really good drama school in the end, full of like very creative people, and so that kind of.
Are you still in touch with the people that you?
Yeah, and like they're still my mates, and they all do
interesting work,
and you know, a lot of them are. I mean, that's like a high-end conservatoire for theatre, so a lot of them have gone on to do like incredible pieces of theatrical work, and so, but that just gives you a lot of like strength and resilience, you know, which is a fortune and a blessing to like be in a place which fosters creativity and makes you go, I actually reckon I can give this a go, or I can do that, or you know, and then I just sort of like, you know, that was the grand old days of MySpace, and you know, I was like, MySpace was, when you think about it, like a really music first platform. You had to put your favorite 5 tracks on the front of your profile, and like bands were, you know, the Arctic Monkeys came through because of MySpace, was like how they were sort of discovered, you know, in a way. And so the music element of that social media was they were so sort of intrinsically linked, and it was very easy to find and communicate with bands in a way that, you know, now you message somebody on Instagram and it might be a management company that are running it, or they might not read it, but back then in MySpace you could literally like talk to
direct connection
to a musician. And then I was just, beg stealing and borrowing equipment, and I used to like watch YouTube videos of like how to shoot stuff, and then go out and try it the next day, come back and go, God, I shot that really badly. Okay, I'll try again tomorrow, and just slowly keep doing it and keep doing it.
And was it a kind of conscious, this is a career path and I'm going to try and get it to a production company at this point? Or was it just like having...
No, it was just an avenue that presented itself, and I had no fixed idea of what type of person I wanted to be. I knew that I was a creative person, whether I made theatre or film, and still now it's like I make film, but I don't feel defined by being a filmmaker, because I still make music, and I still take photographs, I still write, and I still do loads of other bits and bobs. So I have no real fixed idea of, my title doesn't determine who I am. It's like I'm just a creative I like being creative. I like creating things.
So you were going out there on your own, or did you have a team of people you were working with?
At the time, it was like my mate owned a 5D,
right?
And I would borrow his 5D, go out, shoot stuff, come back.
Did you edit yourself?
Yeah, edit, learn how to use Final Cut on a cracked version of Final Cut. One of the coolest things about being dyslexic is they give you free computers. So I got a free computer, which was...
I didn't know you could get...
it was a real touch, man. Yeah, they gave me a free computer in 2008 at uni. It was a university thing.
Okay, I was at uni at the ring time.
And they were, I think it was like a government scheme to sort of help dyslexic people or something,
Right.
And I don't even know what but they gave me a Mac.
Yeah.
Never had a Mac in my life, never had a laptop in my life, didn't even have a phone. And I was like, okay, learn how to edit. And then that just snowballed. And then suddenly I kind of became known just amongst my mates, not known in any way, of like, oh, Joe can shoot things for you. So if people were like in a band or starting a band, or if I had some mates that went and worked at some ad agencies, and they were like, oh, it was at a time when budgets were still quite good, but ad agencies had started to make content without knowing it was content or having a home for it. But I remember getting a call from TBWA in Manchester, and they were like, hello, we would like to pay you £10,000 to make something for GHD. And I was like, and every production company in the world had turned them down, because like, who can do anything on a 10 grand budget in 2009 or 10? And I think I had like 50 quid in my bank account, and I was like, you want to pay me 10 grand? I was like, you mad? Like, what the hell? Like, and that's when I suddenly went, oh, actually, like, I could...
This is a business.
Well, not a business. No, it's like I could actually sustain myself.
Right.
Because so I was in a theatre company that I founded. We were touring around doing shows, and we'd do a show. It'd take 10 weeks of rehearsal, of R&D and rehearsal every day, when we weren't working in our like jobs. Then we'd go and do it. We used to go and tour a lot in Europe, because they were silent shows. So we'd go to Slovakia, or we'd go to the Czech Republic, and like we'd come back, divvy up the money, and we'd all earn 50 quid from like 20 weeks work or something. And you're like, whatever, man, that's cool. So suddenly I was like, actually, there's this world where I can sustain myself as an artist, and I don't have to go back to the normal.
Yeah, that was the magical thing about commercials for me as well, is that, it's an area of filmmaking where you can actually have a life in this, you can build a life in this country.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you wanted to do films here back at the time I was working, when I started the industry, you didn't do it in this country. You could maybe do that in America, but certainly, and but with UK commercials at the time, that felt like a real achievable kind of lifestyle, and a very good lifestyle as well, because it gave you time because you were working freelance, and you're getting paid very, very well for your time when you were working, but you had plenty of time to be pursuing other things as well.
So that was how I ended up. But it was music videos that were really like the first thing that I started to do, and then started to do professionally.
Right. And what? So when you did your early work, the Grabrielle Aplin and the Coldplay.
Yeah.
That's your. Would you say they're some of your first like professional?
Yeah, I did think I did a few videos. The first professional video I did was for a band called the Band of Skulls, and it was a bunch of bowling Mexican luchadors, and we shot it in Rowan's in Finsbury Park.
Do you have this?
It might be on my website. I don't know actually. Maybe. Actually, it might not be. Maybe I've not.
I didn't see it on your website.
It did. It got into like some BFI festivals and things. That was the first like professional thing I'd ever shot. It had $9,000 budget.
Yeah.
John Moore was the commissioner. I don't know if you know John Moore.
No.
And a guy called Jason Ellis shot it. He was.
Oh, I know Jason. Jason, he's a focus ball for me.
Yeah, he's great. Jason,
yeah, I love Jason. Yeah.
Jason shot it. All the cast are basically my mates from the theatre company, and you know, it was I just basically got my mates down to Rowan's and then put them all in Mexican luchador.
Wonderful. Does it look like you can find it? Oh, great. Okay, we'll have a look at that.
Yeah, it's a good piece, and
were you represented at the time?
So at the time, I had just. It was basically I don't know if I was represented then actually. I'd been introduced to a company in Manchester called Chief that I was living in London, and I'd go and knock on every production company's door and say, "Hi, I'm a director," and they'd be like, "Yeah, get back to you, mate, or come make a cup of tea." And I was quite headstrong in the fact that I'd gone to a very good drama school, I'd trained to be a director, I ran a theatre company, and we were touring all over Europe, and I was making work myself. I was like, I don't feel like I should come and make tea. I feel like that's a real, bad use of my skills, And I understand it because that was the structure of that I didn't know. I was unconscious of it, but that was the structure of that world which I was completely oblivious to. So then I got introduced. A friend of mine introduced me to Chief in Manchester, and this is it. That's Eva, who was the producer in the theatre company. Actually, there's a few directors in here that's Ben Tong, who's the director he's at Dark Energy now. That's Sam Bailey, who's a great director. He's got 5 UK music video nominations.
Wonderful. Yeah.
There's a guy called Carl Shepherd in this, who's a great comedy director.
And it looks like it's shot. Is it anamorphic?
Yeah, anamorphic on red.
Yeah.
And I think the budget for this was like £9,500.
Yeah.
And we just basically got some parkans and put them behind the...
Yeah, nicely done, Jason. Yeah, to get your blue streaks.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. And how did you meet Jason?
I actually have no idea how Jason ended up on this. I think someone at the production company... So I'd been introduced to Chief, and they one of their producers helped produce this for me. I can't remember if I was technically signed and on their website, but I was on their radar.
Yeah.
And I think they said you needed a DOP, and they put me in touch with Jason Ellis.
And this is a location, where was this location?
This is Rowan's in Finsbury Park.
All right.
Rowan's bowling alley.
All right. I've never been there.
It's actually, once you see it, once you've seen it once, you then see it in loads of other music videos.
Yeah, I can imagine it's a popular location because it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. For your first kind of, commercial music videos, it's quite it's quite kind of quite an achievement, eh?
Yeah, this is someone who's watched every Coen brothers
yeah,
film
I was gonna say,
on repeat,
right
for 5 years or whatever.
Yeah, it's got a bit of Big Lebowski there for sure. Yeah.
And and like there's a I've always liked quite considered work, things that are images that are considered beautiful, pointed. The filmmakers that I like are filmmakers that are considered in their framing and in their approach to photography, like the Coens, like Paul Thomas Anderson, someone like they lean into creating beautiful images and framing the world beautifully. So that's I've kind of always, even from the beginning, done that. I've tried to sort of But this is actually one of the only pieces of comedy I've ever made. It's like, because it's quite a funny film, taken very seriously. But I don't really make things like this anymore. But this is one of the first ones. And then this got me on the radar of music video commissioners, and then I got sent, Grabrielle Aplin and
the stuff we're gonna look at next. But you so you said this is for Chief in Manchester.
Yeah,
so you didn't end up going with Chief.
I was signed
signed
to
to them.
Chief for a long time.
Right.
I was kind of living in London, working in Manchester.
Right.
And I think, again, there was like a bit of freedom up there. Like, I think, it's a bit of the wild, in a way that I love. And I think they would also, the Mancunians would also probably attest to. It's a little bit of the Wild West. Like, you can kind of get away with shooting things a little bit rock and roll up there, or get, it's a little bit more, or it was a bit more of a kind of,
slight guerrilla approach.
Slightly guerrilla approach to filmmaking up there. But that also then leaves a load of creativity and freedom, and, I'm sure it's a little more structured in London, I think, and people quite rightly want you to like follow protocol or follow the hierarchy or follow the rules or whatever, and within reason. There's obviously still mavericks down here, but just that I kind of ended up liking the freedom and, again, the anonymity of living in London, working in Manchester, and in the nicest possible way. It's like, nobody was looking at me. Like, I wasn't like the cool director on anybody's radar. I wasn't a new kid at any of these big illustrious companies, like,
And that gives you time. It gives you an advantage to kind of learn your craft rather than being thrown in at the deep end.
And I was like, at that point, I was like, I don't care what I shoot. I just want to shoot. Like, I just want to be on set. I want to work. I want to find out what I like, what I don't like. And so it really benefited me to sort of not be, this is our new young director signing and they're going to be the greatest thing in the world. It was like, I'm just off in a corner making some weird stuff.
It's like what you were saying to me earlier about the parents, and not having like huge expectations put on your, from your, either your parents or the institutions you're part of, but being free to kind of find it on your own and sort of develop it on your own.
I mean, I'm a big football fan, and you see it a lot in football. It's equatable in some ways. It's like, the new great young player at, in the England squad. Like, I grew up with Rooney because I'm an Everton fan, and it's like the amount of pressure that guy had as soon as he went to Man United is like, and he handled that pressure perfectly. But you see a lot of people in football, the great new amazing player that kind of crumbles under the pressure and can't handle it because it's a lot. And in hindsight, when I look back, I didn't even know I was doing it, or necessarily wasn't a decision. But I'm very grateful in hindsight for that journey where I just kind of, by the time anybody knew me in the industry, I was like, oh, you had already done 10,000 hours.
Yeah, already
shot loads of stuff,
Yeah. So take us up to the Grabrielle Aplin. So you finished your what's this one called again?
This was the Band of Skulls.
Band of Skulls. So and then what happened in between that today?
I think, I just went back to making a bunch of music videos for a lot of bands, and so the commissioner on Grabrielle Aplin was a guy called Sam Seeger, and I basically there was a director at Chief called Sing J. Lee who has done very well for himself. Good old Sing. He's a good friend of mine. And he, again, Mancunian, he had an agent, and not just a representative. He had a music video agent called Alexa Haywood. And this was probably about 2010, 9-10. And he introduced me to Alexa, and I've been working with Alexa now for 13 years, And but he introduced me. She was like, okay, I think I can get you some more tracks. You've got a few things that are really cool. And she sent me this, and it was an exploration in, okay, I've done like some cinematic things, and I've done some documentary type things, and I've done some I've done lots of different work, but what I hadn't done was anything that was simplistic, like on purpose, like really singular,
honed down.
And I think my internal journey of my life is that, like, I think at this point I realized that I was overcompensating for my belt lack of experience in the film world, where I was a bit of a like, you know, hadn't even imagined that I'd be a filmmaker, and now I'm a filmmaker. And so I was, you know, like the Band of Scores you watch, that it's actually very polished for a first music video.
It certainly is, yeah.
And that was probably like me overcompensating for a fear of like, oh God, I'll be found out. Like, I better make it really good. And this film, I kind of gave myself a bit of freedom of just going, what would be the funnest thing that I could make? What would be just the funnest thing that I could do? The simplest thing? How can I really hone it down into like one singular concept that can stretch over a 3-minute video?
So my notes are with regard to this. So I wanted to ask you about the process of how you came up with this idea, because for me, it's like you listen to the music and then you had the prominent drums as a spine running through the track, and that became the idea came out of that, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I thought there was actually, I mean, I think it's worth kind of noting your references, which is that, you know, I started to really consume music videos as a maker of film, and then, you know, I started to go back and watch a lot of music videos and things. You know, I'd always watch music videos as a kid. It was always like, you know, T4 or whatever was always playing music videos on a Saturday morning or whatever. And so, but there was a wicked, I love it, I think it's such a great music video by Gondry for the Vines, where there's like loads of people in a room all playing. There's like guys on guitars and drums, and they're all playing in the band, and they've packed this room full of people. And I just love the sort of the energy within that room of lots of people playing. It creates lots of like dynamic shots. And so that film was in my head, and listened to the drum track of this, just thought, actually, like, lots of drummers playing this would be a very powerful image. And then my treatment for this was I laid out a load of paper clips, bulldog clips, little pink bulldog clips. And I got a giant bulldog clip and my iPhone, my camera phone or whatever it was at the time, a little point and shoot or whatever. And I played the track, and I mapped out
worked out the camera
and how one shot,
and how it would reveal at certain points of the track. Because that's
and then sent that to Sam Seeger, and he was like, "This is mad. Let's do it." Yeah,
that's great. I mean, because it's how the idea develops to run alongside the journey of the musical track.
Yeah,
which is really successful.
Like, I think it's about surprise. Surprise is something that like we don't tend to think about. I think as filmmakers, like, how do you surprise the audience? How do you turn a corner? Like, how do you deliver them something new? I think we can get so conscious of telling the story and getting from start to finish that we forget that we need to surprise people.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly a surprise when you turn around and see, how many is it?
I think I can't remember actually, 40, 50, something like that.
Yeah.
There's actually a very funny story of process on this that might be worth knowing, which is the crane op was a guy called Julian Mawson. Did you know Julian?
No.
So I call him the Oscar winner because you go on his IMDb and he was like a camera crane op on Skyfall, you know, on the one shot through Mexico, a camera a camera operator on The Avenger. It's like every film he's ever done is like, it's like a massive, unbelievable film.
Yeah.
And I was looking for a crane op. Ben Fordersman shot this. We couldn't find anyone to op the crane. It was a busy period. No one was around. And a friend of mine is a focus puller on features. And I messaged him. I said, "Do you know any crane ops?" He said, "Oh, you should try Julian. Like, see if you can get him." So we called him up and he was like, "Yeah, I'm free actually. I'll come down." And he came down, and up until this point, my experience of music videos is everybody turns up, freaks out, shoots, screams, shouts, runs around like a mad fly, like tries to like basically make the day. And Julian was like, got there at sort of 10 in the morning, and he said, "Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to send the artist away, tell her to go away. Like, we don't need her. And we don't need the label, we don't need anybody. What I want to do is spend the first 7 hours of the shoot day just with you going back and forth through the tracks, and we want to do every 10 seconds of the track, and then we rewind it, do the next 10 seconds, rewind it, do the next 10 seconds, and I'll just work it out with you. And I was like, you are mad. I was like, you want me to send everyone away? I was like, we're trying to do a one shot. We need to shoot it a lot. He was like, no, we'll get it in 4 takes at the end of the day. I was like, you're insane. And he's like, no, we'll get it in 4 takes. And we sent the record label away, sent Grabrielle away. And it was literally like we played the track in 10-second increments, then went back and did 20 seconds, then went back and did 30 seconds, then went back and did 40 seconds. And he was almost like motion controlling his arms, where he was like, okay, what do you want me to do now? Okay, right, great. Well, I can't get that there. Maybe if I come here, that's really nice. Okay, great. Maybe we need to move the bass here. You know, the orchestration, I was watching a feature film guy work, not like a music video guy.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, with the greatest respect to all of us that were in music videos, it's like chaos, isn't it, shooting a music video? And that was like unbelievable structure. And sure enough, she came back, and the third take is the take that we used.
Yeah.
We finished half an hour early.
I've got to say, there's something about
it's like unbelievable.
Having a real craftsperson that really knows their crafts and what they bring to something. You know, there is obviously in our industry now, there's a whole new generation of filmmakers every year. There's a new generation of filmmakers, and unless everyone retires, there's an oversaturation of filmmakers, unfortunately. But there's something about these old kind of, you know, approaching retirement age filmmakers, and they have, like you were talking about, the 10,000 hours. They have it in their DNA. They've done it so many times before. And I personally really like an intergenerational set. Whereas when I first started my career, I worked with Brave Films a lot, and Michelle Stapleton, my producer, because I started doing commercials. I was like 25 years old. Back then was actually quite young as a DOP to be shooting kind of, you know, proper APA commercials. And she said that you're a young skipper at sea and you need a very experienced crew, or you'll sink your ship, right? So I was working with people like Bill Geddes, who's Stanley Kubrick's grip, and some really experienced gaffers that had been doing. You know, most of my crew individually, they're over 60 years old, each of them, and they had a collective age of centuries. And then when I got older, when I got to my age, you know, I'm now 57. So I like to have a young crew, and I'm the kind of like the old boy. But I think having an intergenerational set is really healthy.
Yeah,
super healthy thing.
But I think like, you know, also there's so much knowledge that you don't even realize until you're in the presence of it. You know, that you'd never get if you stuck with people in your same.
That's right. And there's a fear of people stepping out of that. So, you know, because we are tribal creatures, right? So you kind of grow, you can't come up with your generation of filmmakers, and you don't really want to step outside that. Why do you want to work this old far? Or why do you want, you know? But there's some real value in that, and it's only when you have an experience like you were talking about that you think, oh my God, these people bring into, like you said about Picasso, at first he had experience in one decision, and he was so sure about it, and you knew that he knew what he was talking about, that you listened, right? And that made the day.
And it was like, you know, that was a big actually the person that produced this, a guy called Matt Clyde, who was a first AD for a long time and then became a producer, really good mate of mine, wicked guy, and he was the one that was like, I think we should do what he's saying. And I was like, no, this is mental. Like, what the hell are you on about? I can't do that. Like, because I'm like, I've written a check that I've got to cash, which is deliver you a one shot, and you want me to send everyone away and not be trying to do it now. And it was, you know, we then did another one shot for Sam Smith, which was through a theatre. And I used Julian again. It was the same approach, where we didn't have Sam on set until right at the end. And we just nailed it at the end. Yeah,
because and you're keeping your performance fresh as well by the end, right? And so that was super smart to realise that.
It's very clever, and you realise that, like, all that matters is what's in that box, and how you get there doesn't
matter. Yeah. Should we have a look at the Coldplay?
Yeah.
Because I think there's some you know, speaking of the accumulation of meaning and how an idea develops and runs alongside the track. I think this is another good example of that, and it's kind of like you know, both these music videos are a real kind of, I think, a real education to people writing ideas for music videos. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for part 2.